If you've been dreaming about owning one of those fantastic homes that Kerry Tarno is always touring on his channel, but you don't know if it's practical or even possible for you, you're in the right place. By the end of this video, you're going to have a solid understanding of the different types of prefab homes that are available and whether one will work for you. Hi, my name's Amy, and I've spent the last year researching building options for our property in Colorado. Today, we're going to talk about the pros, the cons, and the reasons we've decided to go prefab. Let's get into it. The first thing we need to square away is what we mean by prefab homes, because that term gets thrown around to cover everything from manufactured houses to modular homes, and they're not the same thing. Let's start with manufactured homes. You've all seen these being driven down the highway. They're the modern version of what we used to call trailers or mobile homes. These houses are built on a steel chassis with a hitch at the front and tires at the back, and they're completed almost entirely in the factory, right down to the interior finishes. When the house is delivered to the site, it can either be set on a permanent foundation or you can wrap it with sheeting to cover up the tires and leave it like that. Once it gets to the site, all that's really left to do is move in. Next, let's go to the opposite end of the prefab home spectrum and talk about kit homes. This concept has been around for a long time. Sears and Roebuck was a pioneer in this market back in 1908 when they started selling these deconstructed homes in their catalogs. They packed up everything you'd need to build the house, except the cement, brick, and plaster, and shipped it out on a freight train with a set of instructions. They promised that you could finish the house in as little as 90 days. Like the old days, kit homes are still intended primarily for do-it-yourselfers. You get a shipment of pre-cut materials that are assembled entirely on site. It's like IKEA, but for a house. And what's included in the different kits varies greatly between manufacturers. Some just include the shell. You don't even get the shingles or the siding. And with other companies, you can order everything you need to complete the house, right down to the appliances and the light fixtures. So it's important to understand what you're getting when you look at the pricing of different kit homes. Panelized homes fall in between kit homes and manufactured homes as far as how much of the work gets done on site. In this case, the manufacturers generally assemble the walls, including the doors and the windows, and line them up on trays to be shipped to the building site along with the rest of the pre-cut construction materials. Once there, the walls go up quickly, and that gives you a jump start on how much time it takes to complete the rest of the construction. The last type of prefab home we're going to talk about are modular homes. Modular homes are built in sections or modules in a factory and then transported to the building site where they're set on a permanent foundation. Similar to manufactured homes, modular homes are pretty much finished when they ship. But unlike manufactured homes, which are built to the less strict standards set by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, modular homes have to comply with state and local building codes, like traditional stick-built homes. Now that we're on the same page as far as the different types of prefab homes that are available, let's talk about the pros and the cons of each one. In fact, let's start with the cons, because I like to get the bad news out of the way first. As we compare prefab home options, most of the cons relate to manufactured homes, and that goes back to the fact that they're only built to the HUD standards. Kit homes, panelized homes, and modular homes, as well as conventionally constructed homes, stick-built homes, all have to meet local and state building codes, though you'd want to verify that with any prefab home manufacturer you're considering. Another hurdle to clear when you're looking at building a prefab home are land use restrictions. Prefab homes have been around for a long time, but they weren't always as desirable as they are now. So there are community associations and even local regulations that prohibit prefab homes in certain communities. If you already own a lot, this could be a deal breaker for you. And if you're looking to buy a lot, you definitely want to check with the building inspector and the community association to find out if there are any limitations on the type of home you can put on your property. A house is a big investment, often the biggest we make in our life. And we want to be smart about how we're spending our money. So it's important to understand how the different types of prefab homes hold their value. For example, a manufactured home is more likely to decrease in value than the other types of prefab homes. Now, there are exceptions to every rule, but in general, You want to know going into this that if you choose a manufactured home, you could be facing an uphill battle to get your money back out of it when it comes time to sell. Whereas if you choose a kit home, a panelized home, or a modular home, their value will act more like a conventional home and tend to increase over time. This idea of increasing and decreasing value brings us to another point, and that is, how do you finance a prefab? Getting a typical mortgage is a complicated process, with the factors that determine if you're approved or not always changing. Getting a construction loan is a little bit more complicated because not all banks offer them. Now we add the additional factor of financing a prefab home, and very few banks are familiar with the process or have the policies in place to deal with that kind of a loan. So what I found in my research is that most people are using a home equity loan on their current house to build their new prefab home. They're taking out a personal loan, which they then convert to a regular mortgage once the construction is completed, or they're using cash to finance the building of their new prefab home. If those types of financing aren't available to you, a prefab home might not be the best choice for you. Another con to consider with prefab homes is the difficulty of transporting them. The more the house that's completed in the factory, the more difficult it can be to get it to your building site. And this affects modular homes more than the other types of prefab. That's because modular homes are built in sections in the factory and then set on a trailer to be transported out to the building site. Once there, you need a crane to lift the sections off of the trailer and place them on the foundation, where they're assembled by a crew. Depending on the building site, the cost of transporting the house, renting the crane, and hiring the set crew could make a modular home more expensive than just building a house in place using conventional methods. The final con that we're going to talk about with prefab homes is the amount of customization that you're allowed to do. Most prefab home builders allow some customization, but generally speaking, the more you customize the house, the more expensive it's going to be. So if you're the type of person who really wants to make a lot of decisions as to how the house is going to look and feel when it's finished, you might be better off going with a traditionally built custom home. Now that we've talked about all the drawbacks of prefab homes, you might be wondering why anyone would ever want one. Fortunately, there are benefits to prefab that outweigh all of those potential drawbacks. The first pro people are generally looking for when they consider a prefab home is cost. They're thinking that this might be a less expensive way to build a home, and that might be true. It comes back to how much customization you want and how much of the construction you might be able to do yourself. But if cost is your primary concern, it's not necessarily true that a prefab home will cost less to build than a stick build. One of the reasons we're choosing a prefab home is for the streamlined process. From drawing up the plans, to submitting them for permits, to shipping the house right to the site. Prefab home manufacturers have a step-by-step system that makes building a home easy to understand and therefore less stressful. We also like that prefab homes are built with the aid of computers that determine the most efficient use of the materials. So there's less waste associated with building a prefab home than a conventionally built new home. And the waste that is created when building a prefab home in the factory generally gets recycled rather than ending up in a landfill. Another important benefit in choosing a prefab home is that some manufacturers partner with construction companies who will complete the on-site construction. You might have noticed that I'm no spring chicken, and the idea of unloading the building materials and assembling an entire house didn't appeal to me. On the other hand, finding a contractor that we could trust to build our house was also daunting. Our lot's in a rural part of southern Colorado, where most quality builders are looking at a 2-year backlog. But the biggest reason we're choosing a prefab home is for the speed of construction. Not just because we're excited to have the house, but because the lot we're building on is at 9,500 feet in elevation. So our window for building is really short. The faster we can get the house built, the less time any of the parts of the house that aren't supposed to be exposed to the weather will be. Now you know the pros and the cons of the different types of prefab homes that are available. If you're thinking this could be a good idea for you, you'll enjoy my next video where we'll talk about how to find a reliable prefab home builder. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one.